What did Obama know, and when did he know it? The stunning bombshell email that was declassified this week.
This is the real problem. You can't allow Americans to be investigated by a secret court where you don't get an attorney, you don't get due process, you don't get the Fourth Amendment.
I talk one-on-one with Senator Rand Paul. For the first time since his conviction, Roger Stone is back with us.
No, I think he has a serious problem. He either perjured himself in one place or he perjured himself at the other, but he was under oath in both places.
And you don't want to miss my discussion with Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
They wanted that name out before the inauguration so they could leak it and they could get Flynn out because they were afraid of Flynn because Flynn knew where all the bodies were buried.
Senator Tom Cotton and Congressman Devin Nunes are here also. That and so much more.
This is about watching the person that assaulted me be elevated to the highest office in the land.
Right now in America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. I'm Eric Bolling. We have an incredible show with a guest lineup you won't see anywhere else. That's why we're the fastest growing political show broadcast across the country. I'll ask the tough questions you won't hear from the mainstream media, I promise. My goal, no matter what side of the aisle you sit on, is to get you the truth. The New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, has become quite a star lately. Every day, the governor delivers an update on the state of New York and its response to the coronavirus. Now, each day, CNN and MSNBC break into whatever Trump bashing they may be in the middle of to take the governor live. These briefings have become a must-see for fawning women and men who are just so happy Governor Andrew Cuomo is their governor, or perhaps maybe their president one day. It appears Cuomo has become somewhat of a Casanova. Now, let's take a look at a couple of those briefing updates.
Talked to a couple who drove up from Queens for Thai food to Albany. And I said, you came up for Thai food from Queens. You know, it's a 2.5-hour ride. And they said, yeah, we had to get out of the house.
And here's another update.
My daughters, Mariah, and Mariah brought her boyfriend, who's also here. The boyfriend is very nice, and we like the boyfriend. Advice to fathers. The answer on what you think of the boyfriend is always, I like the boyfriend.
No wonder the Love Gov is so appealing to the ladies and some of the gents. He talks about food. He talks about his daughter's dating habits. That's so nice. Problem is that the governor is supposed to be briefing his state and the nation on the latest from the virus that's killing its way through the state of New York. Perhaps the Love Gov would rather talk about Thai food and his daughter's dating habits than the facts about his state, like the fact that the death rate in New York blows away the rest of the United States. Now, before you Love Gov lovers jump at me, these are rates of death. In other words, I accounted for population size. Now, did you know New York's death rate is 146 per 100,000 people? I compared that to the 4 U.S. states with the biggest populations. No one comes close. In fact, New York State blows away the rest of the world, too. New York has a mortality rate higher than any country on the planet. As for total deaths, get this. More New Yorkers have died from coronavirus than the total number of people dying in Italy, Spain, Brazil, China, Canada, or Mexico. A little further homework here. I noticed New York State spends more money per person than any of the big 4 states as well. And lastly, did you know there are more physicians per 100,000 in New York State than in California, Texas, and Florida? So it's not the money, and it's not the access to a doctor. So what is it? Why has New York failed so badly with fighting the coronavirus? All arrows point to this man. He was the one who refused to deliver a shelter-in-place order and declared the fear, the panic is bigger problem than the virus. Now that, folks, was March 18th, 2020, the very most crucial time to be locking things down. That mistake, among many others, is the reason New York is the capital of coronavirus mortality. And you, Governor Cuomo, are the poster boy for failure. Total, unequivocal failure on a global basis. You failed the state and the country. Now, to my former neighbors and colleagues, I used to live there 35 years in the Big Apple. Congrats, New York. I know how much you love being #1. P.S. So glad to be out of there. But it begs the question, however, why in God's name are we still being subjected to this man's daily rants? More importantly, this man is being talked about to run for president. My message to New York: oh, hell no, you can keep him there, thank you. And a big oh, hell no to the Cuomo ladies' underwear as well. The bombshell interview my friend and former colleague Megyn Kelly did with the woman who accuses Joe Biden of sexual assault continues to make waves. In an explicit interview, Tara Reid details the assault while she was an aide to then-Senator Joe Biden. Watch.
He had his hands underneath my clothes, and it happened all at once. So he had one hand underneath my shirt, and the other hand, I had a skirt on, and he went down my skirt and then went up. And I remember I was up almost on my tippy toes. And when he went inside the skirt, he was talking to me at the same time, and he was leaning into me. And I pulled this way away from his head, I remember. And so he was kissing my neck area, and he whispered, "Did I want to go somewhere else?" in a low voice.
Megyn Kelly joins me now to discuss what led up to that groundbreaking interview. Megyn, thank you so much for being here. You know, I watched that. That was a very gutsy move to ask her specifically what happened. Tell us a little about what went behind that question.
Well, I mean, she's had some difficulty getting attention to her story. It's not that it hasn't been covered at all, but it hasn't been covered anywhere near the amount we saw with the Trump accusers or the Kavanaugh accusers. So I thought once and for all, it'd be nice to just get her on the record, on camera, talking about exactly what happened. And, you know, she told it in painstaking detail. And I think that's a valuable exercise because it gives the viewer the opportunity to say, I believe her, or I don't believe her. You know, people get a gut instinct for this kind of thing, and it's tough to give that to them over the phone or on a podcast. I think looking at her, sizing her up, there's no substitute for it.
You know, what was your takeaway? You were there in person. A lot of times people can, you know, put on a little bit of face, put on a little bit of acting, but you were there in person. You spent some time with her. Was she believable?
Well, I don't want to say what my own opinion was because I want to continue covering this case, right? And who cares what I think? It's irrelevant. What's important is what the viewers think. But I tried to press her on all the, you know, perceived weaknesses in her case that have been raised by people who have decided not to believe her. You know, is it really likely that a sitting U.S. senator would assault a young staffer just within 2 minutes of seeing her in the middle of a Senate building, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day? And she answers all of that. To people who think he's just a kind, jovial guy and he's not capable of this kind of callousness, what do you say to them? She's got answers for all of it. You know, none of it answers the question about what it really happened, but you get a sense of whether this is a well person you're talking to, right? Because there has to be something wrong with Tara Reid. And I mean this, there has to be something wrong with her if she's made this up. My own belief is that she has very good evidence. She did tell at least 2 people about the alleged assault at or around the time that it happened. And I've spoken with her best witness, who she claims she told right after. That's the one we called Karen in the interview. That woman's a working professional. She's very credible. She talks about it with authority. I think there's a very strong case that Tara told her friend Karen all these same details 30 years ago, that Karen heard the same story about the assault. But that doesn't answer whether it in fact happened.
One of the most important moments of this interview, Megyn, for me, and tell me about what went behind you asking this question. Let's take a listen about the polygraph. Let's roll it, Control.
Some of those who supported her, but now have found a reason not to support you, say, well, she was under oath. Mm-hmm. Would you go under oath?
Absolutely.
They say, well, she subjected herself to cross-examination. Would you do that?
Absolutely.
They also point out that she took a polygraph controlled by someone on her team. Is that something you want to do?
I'm not a criminal. Joe Biden should take the polygraph.
So, I mean, this is something that you could use to play devil's advocate and you know, argue what Joe Biden's team would say. this is something you could use to say this is evidence potentially of deception. Because I'll just give you an example that the truth sort of detectives would give you. If I say to you, Eric, did you rob the Citibank this morning at 10 a.m. on 53rd and Lex? You would say, no. And I would say, would you take a polygraph? And you'd say, sure. And that would be pretty much the end of the discussion. And so in deception detection, expertise and classes and so on, they'll tell you that anybody, because if you listen to the full answer, and you can see it on my YouTube channel, she goes on to say polygraphs aren't admissible in court. And what kind of setup are we going for if we're going to ask victims of sexual assault to take polygraphs? I'm not a criminal. He's the criminal, so on and so forth. If you sort of attack the question or attack the premise of the question, that can be a sign of deception. I'm not saying it necessarily was here. I'm just saying, like, there's stuff in the interview for both sides. And I would say her answer to that question, while it sounded like a spike the ball moment, like boom, might actually not have been that great for her.
All right. Megyn, there's another story, speaking of the media and Me Too, there's another story that's been making the rounds. Ben Smith of the New York Times did a very biting, very gutsy, I'll call that a gutsy piece, pointing out that Ronan Farrow, he's been the Me Too darling. He's been the journalist that's exposed so many evil things going on with accused men around the country. Ben Smith went after him a little bit. He opened the door to maybe a little bit more scrutiny. Tell us what you think of what's going on with Ronan. First of all, can you weigh in on Ronan himself?
Well, I think Ronan's been a force for good in the country. I think we'd still have Les Moonves running CBS and Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood abusing women serially if it hadn't been for Ronan Farrow. So let's just get that straight up front. Does that mean that he's always been completely careful about his factual reporting? I don't know. I haven't done a fact check on all of his reporting. And, Ben Smith took a deep dive on whether he'd checked certain facts in some of his reporting and came up with the answer of no, which Ronan and the New Yorker deny. But I think it's okay for Ben Smith to do this. Some people have hit him just for sort of attacking the so-called sacred cow of Ronan Farrow. No reporter is above reproach. All of us are subject to critique and checking of our checking. And that's the least the subject of Ronan's reporting deserves. So I'm fine with the Ben Smith approach. It does strike me as a little ironic that Ben Smith's paper, the New York Times, was the one that ran with the Julie Swetnick completely discredited allegations against Brett Kavanaugh with no problem. So I'd love to see the Ben Smith column on that before we take down Ronan Farrow, because the Julie Swetnick allegations against Brett Kavanaugh really mattered and were absurd, and the Times ran with them.
All right, I ran out of time, Megyn. I could talk to you for hours. Full disclosure, Megyn and I are very close friends for a very long time, and I appreciate your time, Megyn. Across the vast majority of the United States, Sinclair, 44 million households, we're glad to hear from Megyn Kelly. Great talking to you, Megyn.
Good to see you, Eric. I miss you.
Senator Rand Paul has been a big defender of General Michael Flynn and calling out the corruption in the FBI. And this week, there was a massive shakeup. A newly declassified email from former National Security Advisor Susan Rice shows the Obama administration knew a lot more than they were telling us. Senator, you recently introduced a new amendment to the USA Freedom Reauthorization Act to make sure what happened to Flynn and President Trump never happens again. Tell us about it.
Well, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Corps is what they used to go after President Trump's campaign. And my point of view has been that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Corps should be investigating foreigners, not Americans. The Constitution provides for the Fourth Amendment. If the government wants to listen to your phone calls or eavesdrops on a campaign employee like Carter Page, they have to go to an Article III court, a court created by the Constitution, and they have to get a warrant that says probable cause that you have committed or are committing a crime. That's a pretty high standard. That's the Fourth Amendment. The FISA court doesn't have to prove probable cause. They just have to prove probable cause that you might be associated with a foreign government. So it's a much lower standard. The problem with this is that you get a lot of investigations of political folks as well as Americans that really are using a standard less than the Constitution. So I think it's wrong what they did to the Trump campaign. And so I offered an amendment. And my amendment would simply say this, that this foreign surveillance court can't be used on Americans. I would exempt Americans from it. And people said, well, what if there really is a spy in a campaign? How do you go after them? You get a warrant like you do for any other thing. You can get a wiretapping warrant from a federal judge, And they could do that if they really thought someone was a spy, but they'd have to use the Fourth Amendment and the Constitution, not this lower standard.
So, Senator, and very importantly, so it turns out it looks like the FBI or someone representing the FBI went to the FISA court, as you point out, and said, look, we have this Steele dossier. Trump or someone in the Trump campaign may have had ties to the Russians, and they got that wiretap. Now, should something happen to the person that brought that evidence or lack of evidence, that piece of really junk evidence, to the FISA court, should there be punitive damages, punitive action taken against that person or persons?
Yeah, actually, there are penalties in the law for lying to the FISA court. The court relies on the FBI to present this information. The Inspector General discovered that there were dozens of mistruths or untruths or lies, as you might want to put it, from the FBI in the applications. And yes, those people, at the very least, should lose their job for being dishonest. And this is the real problem. You can't allow Americans to be investigated by a secret court where you don't get an attorney, you don't get due process, you don't get the Fourth Amendment. It's a big mistake to allow this to continue to happen. And they passed the FISA reform without my amendment. So my fear is that this could happen again. What happened to Trump could still happen again because we refused to take the bold step that I offered and say that Americans should not be investigated by this foreign surveillance court.
Senator, if I could turn to your doctor expertise for just a minute on the heels of this COVID-19 situation. You know, I saw a report come out that showed that people had dramatically scaled back the times that they're going to see a doctor for some really important things, cancer, colonoscopies, things like that. Are you concerned that that there will be a certain amount of deaths attributed to COVID-19 because we were told to stay in place and not get back out and go see our physicians and our doctors and do the testings that we should have done?
Yeah, I personally have heard of family members who actually had a relative, distant relative of mine or of theirs, who did die from a heart attack and was afraid to go to the hospital. So we have all kinds of cancer screening we do in our country that do a great deal to prevent cancer. Colon screenings, colonoscopy, they've been forbidden. And then also mammograms for breast cancer are two great preventive ways of trying to prevent and treat cancer at an early stage. And I fear that there's a big backlog of all of this, 2 months backlog. The other way we might have deaths from this is by preventing elective surgery at the hospitals. Many of these hospitals are essentially close to bankruptcy. So if we lose rural hospitals, what ends up happening is if you have to drive an hour when you're having a heart attack, some people are going to die on the way to the hospital if we lose these rural hospitals. So really, there's a great deal of damage that's been done to the healthcare system by this. And we've got to open up. We got like a governor in Kentucky who thinks he's, Pol Pot or something. He thinks he's in charge of the entire economy, and we can't open up without his permission. But every day he does that, there's a threat of more people dying, but also realistically a bankruptcy of our hospitals.
Senator Rand Paul, we really appreciate your time. You're a busy man. Thank you for your time again, Senator. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
And now we go to Congressman Devin Nunes. Congressman, thank you for joining us. You know, a lot of this new information keeps rolling out week after week. Tell us the latest, especially that email that now has been uncovered from Susan Rice regarding Michael Flynn.
Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on. What you need to know about that Rice email is that it was really exculpatory evidence on General Flynn. Why that was classified in the first place, we will not know. But it gives a clear direction that Obama was involved. Obama knew about it. And Susan Rice, for some reason, writes an email 2 weeks after the fact. That's really what is breaking in that. And I would just say this, that it shows that they had nothing on General Flynn, even when they briefed Obama. It's really, really concerning.
You know, and one of the other things that came up this week, and I'm not sure this has been cleared up since when it was originally brought up, I think you brought it up, sir, this Interview 302 report, it went missing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so if you go back to 2016, they're investigating the Trump campaign and General Flynn, which in and of itself is really preposterous. This was a 3-star general in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency. If he was a Russian asset, it would be the biggest spy scandal in 500 years of history. So that idea was nuts in 16 that they were doing that, but they were. January 4th of 17, the agent in charge writes a closing communication and says, we don't have anything. Now, that was deep six. It disappeared. We just learned that recently. That was declassified. Fast forward to January 24th. They go into 4 days after Trump is sworn in. General Flynn is the national security advisor. They send in FBI agents to interview him. And every time you interview someone, you do a report on that. We were actually briefed shortly after that, just maybe a month or so after that, the House Intelligence Committee, we were briefed. And now that original report that the FBI always does is gone. It's missing. And I think that is a key document in this investigation to try to hold accountable the Clinton campaign, the dirty cops, the dirty people at DOJ and FBI that were all involved in this.
You know, Congressman, I remember this distinctly. They were giving you such a hard time. You were saying, you know, and you were heading the intel hearings, some of the behind closed door hearings, and they were giving you such a hard time about you saying there's no collusion here. Let's focus in on one name, and I remember this name distinctly. And now, in the hindsight, we know she's been lying. She's been lying all over the place. Evelyn Farkas. Can you tell us about Evelyn Farkas?
Well, we don't know what she was really doing. She's like one of the fools in this matter, okay? Because she did not hold a government position, but she is clearly tight with a lot of Obama-era officials. She had been in the administration 2 years earlier. She had went out at the same early on in 2017, and I'm paraphrasing this, but she made a comment like, oh, me and all of my friends in the Obama administration, we were really going out and we were making sure that we got all this intelligence and we were placing it places to ensure that the Trump campaign didn't destroy it. Now, so of course she would be an obvious witness for us to bring in because she seemed to publicly say that she had some evidence of Russian collusion. Well, when we brought her in, she looked really foolish because under oath, behind closed doors, she had nothing to say, and she essentially admitted that what she was saying publicly wasn't true because she denied it under oath.
And went so far as to mention it on MSNBC and then had to walk that back when the authorities said, hey, what do you know? By the way, this woman wants to run for Congress, I believe, in New York State. I believe it's New York State. Congressman, very quickly, only about a half a minute or so. I remember you getting excoriated by Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler. Some thoughts on looking back hindsight now that all this is really vindicating you. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, of course, I always knew that we were right over the target. We were telling the American people the truth, and we were transparent about it. But look, the real thing here, Eric, is that I knew the whole time because whenever the mainstream media was targeting me and shooting at me or my colleagues, it meant one thing. We were right directly over the target because they wouldn't be wasting time on me and attacking me constantly if we weren't over the target. And now, hopefully, people will pay the price and they will be prosecuted under the law.
All right. Congressman Devin Nunes, appreciate your time. And I guess this story is like an onion. We keep peeling back layers and layers. More and more to come, sir, as they say. Stay tuned. As they say, we'll bring you back again. Thank you, Congressman.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Let's go now to Senator Tom Cotton, who has really been a critic of China's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Senator, thank you for joining us. Boy, I got to tell you, it's just amazing how many people are out of work in this country. And again, I'll call it the China virus, the Wuhan flu, if you will. Sir, what do you know? What's the latest?
Yeah, Eric, China is directly responsible for unleashing a global pandemic on the world. What could have been a local health challenge in Wuhan became a global pandemic because they lied to the world from the very beginning. So more than 35 million Americans have lost their job as a result of that. And tragically, we're approaching 100,000 American deaths as well. That's why China has to be held accountable. It has to start now, and it has to represent a fundamental break with the business as usual model of doing business with China.
Is there a way to, when you say hold them accountable, is there a way to get, I know they'll never bring lives back, but get some sort of restitution financially from them?
Well, one basic thing we could do is to amend our Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act to allow suits to proceed in federal courts against Chinese officials who are responsible for this pandemic. We have a precedent for this. We did it for the 9/11 terror attack victims. I think we should do that for the victims of this virus as well. There's other things we can do directly related to this pandemic, like bringing home critical pharmaceutical manufacturing by giving incentives to build that manufacturing base here and also cutting off imports from China. But, you know, there's a lot of other things that we need in our relationship with China that are frankly overdue, and now is the time to do so. Whether it's building up our military forces in the Western Pacific or stopping the practice of allowing Chinese nationals to study in our most advanced laboratories in things like science and technology fields, or taking other approaches like starting a new World Health Organization that will actually focus on world health, not world politics and defending China. Those and other steps are necessary to fundamentally break from business as usual with China.
Just a minute on that, and I think it's an important topic. The Chinese have basically taken over the South China Sea. We're keeping an eye on them. But Senator, you're a military person. Thank you for your service. Thank you for our freedom. What should we be doing with China in the South China Sea?
Well, unfortunately, in the Obama years, the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army turned a lot of useless rocks in the South China Sea into very dangerous military bases where they can now land fighters and heavy bombers or dock their ships. That gives them much greater opportunity to control the South China Sea, through which more than a third of all global commerce passes. So one thing the Navy has done in the Trump administration is continue to patrolling those areas in a more vigorous fashion to approach the vicinity of those man-made islands to make it clear we don't recognize China's claims over them, but we need to do more. We need to invest more in the kind of submarines and stealth fighters and bombers and mid-range missiles in the region that will deter China, which of course has those things aimed directly at our troops and our friends in the region.
Right. Sir, I want to get to this, but bring it back home because it's a direct result of what happened in China. 35 million Americans out of work. You tweeted earlier in the week about holding back funding to sanctuary cities because so many Americans are out of work. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, so sanctuary cities is a concept in which cities refuse to cooperate with federal authorities enforcing immigration law. We ought not to be funding their operations at a time when so many Americans so desperately need help. So it's a time, again, to use the power of the federal purse to say to states and local governments, if you want the money that we pay through grants, then you need to cooperate with local law enforcement, especially in a time of this terrible recession and a global pandemic.
And again, Senator Tom Cotton, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your time. And also, pick up a copy of his book, Sacred Duty, A Soldier's Tour at Arlington National Cemetery. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Next, you don't want to miss this. For the first time since his conviction, I'm talking one-on-one with Roger Stone. You won't believe what he has to say. And a little later, we have another big name in store. Mayor Rudy Giuliani joins me. Trust me, you don't want to go anywhere. have a special interview right now. I'm joined by longtime friend and confidant to the president, Mr. Roger Stone. The New York Post recently reported that former White House strategist Steve Bannon gave contradictory accounts of his discussions with you, Roger, about WikiLeaks. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it was very, very disappointing. I mean, I knew at trial that Bannon was not telling the truth. And then when the House Intelligence Committee released both my classified testimony and his, and when you compared his sworn testimony before the House committee with his sworn testimony at trial, you could see that he had lied at either one place or the other, committed perjury. Now, the irony of that, Eric, is that I'm specifically charged with lying to the House Intelligence Committee. But based on my reading, I think that Steve lied at my trial. He said we had extensive conversations regarding WikiLeaks. He said that he viewed me as the campaign's access point to WikiLeaks, which was certainly news to me. No, I think he has a serious problem. He either perjured himself in one place or he perjured himself at the other, but he was under oath in both places.
You know, Roger, you talk about this, and I think the president this week tweeted that you were unfairly treated. Now, was there a deal offered to you, Roger Stone? What was the deal offered? I understand that you turned the deal down. What was that all about?
That is correct, Eric. After, the raid on my house, after destroying me financially, after putting enormous pressure on me by gagging me so that I couldn't defend myself in any public forum, on July 24th, just shortly before the Mueller report was issued, one of the prosecutors approached my lawyers and proposed in very careful language that if your client, Roger Stone, was willing to remember, willing to come clean, willing to tell the truth about some 29 phone conversations between himself and candidate Trump in 2016, which they had an absolute record of, well, then we might see our way clear to work something out, perhaps recommend to the judge that he served no jail time. And that, of course, would be lying. That would be letting them compose testimony. And I turned them down flat. I said no. My lawyers warned me that they could issue a superseding indictment and load more charges on me. And I still said no, because it would not be the truth. I think that Donald Trump is literally one of the greatest presidents of my lifetime. And that's tough because I lived under Eisenhower, Nixon, Reagan, and Trump. I've seen firsthand the way he's brought America back. I believe that even though our economy has now been destroyed by COVID virus, that if he showed that he knows how to bring the economy back one time, he can certainly do it again. So I have great confidence in the president. Right. I would never testify falsely against him.
So Roger, someone, a district attorney or a federal attorney, asked you or asked your lawyers to lie to indict the president.
Well, I think it was one of the Mueller prosecutors, and I think they wanted to put this in their report because their report didn't have any Russian collusion. They wanted me to be the ham in their ham sandwich, and I declined. Surely they would have used it as the catalyst for impeachment over Russia. We now know that the entire Russian collusion delusion was a fraud. Worse than that, it was the use of the American government's authority and the intelligence agency's amazing capability to use false information to defraud the courts in order to set up the president of the United States and the people that supported him. This is far worse than Watergate. This is the biggest political scandal in American history, and it's an abuse of power. And whether anybody is held accountable for it still remains to be seen.
You know, you call it the biggest political scandal in American history. It may be the second biggest or maybe the first, given General Flynn. I'll get to that in just a second. The president recently had said, so listen, you're due to report to jail within days, May 30th. The president recently said on Fox that Roger will be okay. What do you take that to mean?
Well, look, I've been very forthright about the fact that my family and I are praying fervently for a pardon. I have had no direct conversations or indirect conversations with the president or the White House. I have not applied for a pardon formally, although that is not necessary. But look, the president's been very clear. The jury forewoman in my case attacked me by name on the day I was arrested and subsequently on Twitter and Facebook. Never mind her repeated attacks on the president and her claim that all Trump supporters are racist. Put that aside, even though I think that should be disqualifying. The fact that she attacked me by name demonstrates bias. We made a motion for a new trial on that basis. It was denied by Judge Jackson, which surprised every legal expert in the country because the Supreme Court has ruled that every defendant, even Roger Stone, is entitled to an impartial and indifferent jury. There was nothing indifferent about this juror. There was no way to know this during the trial because her social media settings were set on private. And then immediately after the trial, she deleted her Facebook page. Her habit was to take Facebook links and post them on Twitter. She deleted her Facebook page, which she had had since 2008, and she opened a new one. The judge denied us the right to subpoena the deleted information from Facebook. So I think most Americans understand that I didn't even get a fair trial. The president certainly understands it. He's spoken about it on Twitter.
You know, Roger, we don't have time. I just want to point out to the audience, you're being accused, or you've been convicted of lying. General Flynn was convicted of lying. We have so many examples of, I can just name a few. James Clapper was in front of a Senate panel and lied to the American people about whether they were being spied on at the NSA. James Comey literally leaked information on purpose that was supposed to be confidential information. I can't get into it now, Roger, but we'd like to get you back. Whatever happens May 30th, we'll get you back after May 30th, whether I've got to go to the prison and interview you there, or we'll get you back here the same way here if you get some sort of delayed sentence or commutation. But I want to talk to you about the way that the right is being treated differently in our legal system. Mr. Roger Stone, appreciate your time, Roger, and good luck, my friend.
Great to be here with you, Eric. Thank you so much.
Next on America This Week, it's the interview you've been waiting for, the president's personal attorney and my good friend, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. That's next. And some great news. Remember that idea I had to salvage American consumer demand? The one I presented here in March, which caught the attention of the president? We administer the money via debit cards, much like the current EBT card. The many products which can be purchased can be decided by your bean counters. That's not what we're worried about. We want it to be easy to spend the money, and to use it or lose it is a powerful way to do that. Well, soon after that aired, I got a call from the president himself. I detailed the prepaid debit card system and offered the idea of calling it the Trump card. I'm thrilled to announce the administration is using much of that idea. Pictured here is Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin handing the president a stimulus debit card, a.k.a. the Trump card. It's beyond comforting to know the commander-in-chief is open to great ideas, no matter where they come from. They'll help the American people. So bravo, Mr. President. Thank you, and glad I could help. The president's personal attorney and former mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani, joins me right now. Mr. Mayor, you heard my monologue talking about the love gov, Andrew Cuomo, and his handling of the coronavirus situation there. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that the responsibility isn't all with him, although, of course, he has to take some of it. A lot of it is with the mayor. There's probably, I probably shouldn't say this, but there's probably no one that knows more about emergency response in New York City than me. I established the first Office of Emergency Management in 1994. The city never had one before. And we trained, we worked, we had plans for everything. We got hit with West Nile virus before September 11. We got hit with Flight 800, which was a terrible catastrophe. Several very serious train derailments, other emergencies. We had 24 plans for all different kinds of emergencies. We practiced all the time, and we worked hand in glove with the state. And I've been on several times with Governor Pataki recently to say that one of the things that we both tell people, when you go through one of these terrible hurricanes or significant emergencies, which is what this is, the governor and the mayor have to be on the same page, to the point where they should be running their governments together. You shouldn't see them separated too often. They should be holding press conferences together. From the first 2 or 3 days of this, when they were denying that there was any problem, they were in separate places. And I know they have a very bad relationship, but I have urged publicly that they patch it up and get together. Right. Because the state cannot run an emergency in New York City. It doesn't have the resources. Right. And the city can't run without the state because it doesn't have the authority. And these two guys don't seem to understand that. They don't seem to understand that they have to be together. Like the nursing home problem should have been a joint problem. Should have been a joint problem of both of them.
Right. Mr. Mayor, I want to get to some of the other news. This week we found out that President Obama was, in fact, not only informed, but he was involved in what looks to be the unmasking of General Flynn. What are your thoughts? And you know, when you're sitting behind the wall, privately talking, what does this really mean for our audience? Understand how important it was that the President Obama was implicated in this.
Well, I mean, yeah, you've got to look at what this is. They say, well, unmasking is not a crime. Leaking sure is. And the unmasking was done for the purpose of leaking. There's no doubt about that. It was done at the very, very last days of the Obama administration. They no longer needed it for intelligence purposes. There was no reason why Joe Biden needed it for intelligence purposes. 15 days before he's leaving office. So they got the name, and then it immediately went to the Washington Post. The purpose of the unmasking was to leak. The leaking is a violation of federal law that carries a 10-year sentence. It's a major felony. And the question is, was that leaking discussed with President Obama? How much of the unmasking was discussed with President Obama? How much did he know about it? Did he know that 38 or 40 different people in his administration all at once asked for the unmasking of General Flynn? I mean, that's a little crazy. 48 members of your administration in a 1-month period going after one guy. Did he know that his vice president upped the ante? I mean, why does a vice president ask for an unmasking? He doesn't do intelligence work. He asked for it because it could influence the guy making the decision. Oh, my God, the vice president wants it. The vice president wants it. They wanted that name out before the inauguration so they could leak it and they could get Flynn out because they were afraid of Flynn because Flynn knew where all the bodies were buried. It was totally illegal, and I'm a little disappointed that the Attorney General has said, you know, it doesn't reach Obama, it doesn't reach Biden. They are clearly subjects of that investigation. They were at the critical meeting. Biden did an unmasking that has no justification. There was a leak. And by the way, they could be one of the two people who leaked. We don't know who leaked. There were only several people who had the name. So it's like an Agatha Christie novel. I mean, we put them all in one room and we figure out who did it. And we get the reporter and we put him in front of a grand jury.
Mr. Mayor, it could have been, you make a good point. It could have been anyone. It could have been James Comey. It could have been anyone in the room. It could have been the man who wants to be president next. Joe Biden may have been involved in it. I mean, these are really
he could have done it by accident.
Accusations.
I'm not making accusations.
Explain.
This is what happened. This is what happened. Here are the facts. No accusations. 38 different people asked for the unmasking of it, including those people. Samantha Power asked for it 7 times but doesn't remember asking. You believe that? 7 times she asked for the unmasking of Flynn, but now doesn't remember it. Maybe she doesn't remember leaking it either. So, and it is absolutely certain that one of them leaked it. And now the question is which one, and how tough are we going to be to try to get it? Tough means you put them all in the grand jury, including Biden and Obama, and you put the reporter in the grand jury. This is national security information. No privilege. No privilege. Gone. You remember they did it in the Scooter Libby case. If they could do it in the Scooter Libby case, which was about nothing compared to this, they could do it in this case where they're trying to disrupt an administration before it even started without any criminal evidence. Without any criminal evidence, they wanted to disrupt an administration. Right. This was not to investigate a crime. It was to take out Flynn. Right. That is clear beyond any doubt. Right. And it should be investigated like a crime.
Mr. Mayor, we love having you back. Great to get you back. And please, stay safe, stay healthy. In that
you too,
very
Eric.
dangerous
I
place
enjoy
in
being
New York
back.
City for many reasons. Thank you, sir.
Not for me. I know it.
Just ahead, she's one of the top experts around. Dr. Nicole Sapphire returns to discuss the latest advances and potential setbacks when it comes to our fight against the coronavirus. Stick around.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America.
United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America strong.
City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America
United we stand. United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America
United we stand.
Dr. Nicole Sapphire, author of the new book, Make America Healthy Again, is back with us. Dr. Sapphire, thank you for being here again. You know, this hydroxychloroquine has become a political football, not a medical football, but a political football. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, Eric, first of all, you know me, I hate when government inserts itself anywhere when it comes to healthcare or just medicine in general. I think nothing good comes out of that for the most part, especially when it comes to certain medications that we can take. Bottom line is no one can really say right now what the risk ratio, the risk to benefit is for taking hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 because the truth is we don't know. Yes, there have been several studies, albeit very limited, that are showing that it is not effective when people who are severely ill take it, but that's not surprising. Now, there are some studies actually that are showing that there may be some benefit in the more mildly symptomatic people. as well as potentially those in using it for prophylaxis. We don't have studies showing that it's effective, but we do know that in other countries, specifically India and Turkey, are saying that they are having a lot of first responders utilize it as a prophylaxis. Now, that doesn't mean that it necessarily works, but we know across the world that people are using it. The NIH has recently launched a study to look at it in the mild, moderate symptoms. And so I really look forward to seeing that. But ultimately, we know that hydroxychloroquine, there's over 6 million prescriptions written for it a year in the United States alone. So although there are risks with it, it has a low risk profile. And, you know, it's a conversation to have between a physician and the patient. We've discussed risk versus benefits for any medication we take, including aspirin.
Right. You know, famously on this show, I asked Dr. Fauci if he were gravely ill with coronavirus, would he take it for himself? Would he take hydroxychloroquine? And he basically said, yes, he would take it for himself. And that didn't really make as much news as I thought it was going to be. Moderna. Moderna is another drug maker who thinks they may have some sort of, inroad to a vaccine. What are you hearing?
Well, Moderna, it's really optimistic right now because they're just rapidly getting through the phases of their human clinical trials, which is, it does take some time. But they're saying that potentially by the fall that they could be in phase 3, which means that we are actually using this in certain high-risk populations to see if it's effective or not. Well, when the fall is when we are thinking that there may be a second wave. If this vaccine actually is effective, then we would already be having some in the high-risk areas be vaccinated. Yes, it would be within the clinical trial, but it won't get to phase 3 unless they are confident that this vaccine is actually somewhat effective. And a couple of studies out of Boston just came out showing that there is immunity once the antibodies are present. Because if you don't have immunity when antibodies are present, what's the purpose of a vaccine? This is the data that I've been waiting for, and we're finally starting to see little pieces of it showing, yes, maybe there is some sort of immunity once you've had a prior infection, and I'm optimistic that once a vaccine becomes available, that there's going to be at least some short-term, hopefully long-term immunity from it.
Doc, I have about half a minute or so. If you did have the COVID-19 and you do have the antibodies, does that mean, and if these studies are true, does that mean we can socialize with other people freely, assuming the antibody means you can't get COVID-19 again?
Well, that's the thing, Eric. We still don't know. And so I'm very hesitant to say if you have the antibodies that you're immune to it, because I don't believe that's true right now. Maybe there's going to be some short-term, maybe some long-term immunity. But yes, if you have positive antibodies, if we're able to prove that it does confer some immunity, then that means that you're relatively protected. But they haven't answered for me yet. Can you still be an asymptomatic carrier even if you have the antibodies?
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Dr. Nicole Sapphire, again, our audience appreciates your time. Thank you so much. Every week we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Tactical Flight Officer Jason Knox with the Houston, Texas Police Department was killed earlier this month when the HPD helicopter he was flying in crashed. Officer Knox was an 8-year veteran of the department. He left behind his wife, a young son, daughter, and his parents. Deputy Sheriff John Roden with the Bell County, Texas Police Department was hit and killed by a vehicle during a car chase last month. Deputy Roden served the sheriff's office for 10 years. He's survived by his parents and 3 brothers. Rest in peace, officers.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America strong.
United we stand.
We stand America strong.
United we stand, ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, points out how rough and tumble politics shape opinion in every region in our country. We tell American stories, stories that touch our people, determine our politics, focus on the future of America.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. Before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America This Week. Even though these photos were from Easter, they're taking the internet by storm. That's Father Tim Pelk with St. Ambrose Parish in Michigan using a water gun to bless Easter baskets inside people's cars. Parishioners and photographer Larry Peplin captured the moments. They were posted on the church's Facebook page last month, but have recently gone viral. Now, in an interview, Father Pelk said the post had a couple of hits at the Vatican, but he hasn't heard from them yet. You have to give the Padre points for creativity. He may have even started a new Easter tradition. Thanks for joining us for another incredible show on America This Week. On this Memorial Day weekend, we want to take this time to remember our fallen brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, husbands, and wives in the armed forces. Thanks to them and their families for fighting for our freedom and making the ultimate sacrifice for our great country. God bless them, God bless you, and God bless America. Good night, everybody.